you look at the calendar, tomorrow is the 12th of February. Marks the birth date, the 209th birth date of Charles Darwin. And so the day has come to be known as Darwin Day. And just like everything else these days, there's his book, there he is. There's a website for Darwin Day. And I'm sure there's probably an app for that too, but there's the website. And when I visited the website, I found their mission statement, and I really like it. Here's their mission statement. The mission of International Darwin Day is to inspire people throughout the globe to reflect and act on the principles of intellectual bravery, perpetual curiosity, scientific thinking, and hunger for truth as embodied in Charles Darwin. What's not to like? And we need this. We need this because I look around the world today and I see way too much intellectual dishonesty, not to mention laziness, a dire lack of curiosity. There's increasing magical thinking and a stunning indifference and even outright disregard for truth. Apparently there's now something that they're calling alternative facts, right? You've heard that? Well, poor Charles Darwin became the lightning rod for centuries of hostility and friction between those who wanted to view the world through the lens of reason and observation and those who wanted to throw out reason and observation if it conflicted with the literal reading of the Bible, as interpreted, of course, by religious, usually male authority figures. That all started 240 years before Darwin came along. That was back when the work of Copernicus and Galileo was banned by the church in the early 1600s because they dared to suggest something that was based on their own observation of what was going on out there in the sky. This idea that it was the earth that revolved around the sun instead of the other way around, as it said in the Bible. Well, the church banned them, called them heretics, and the church eventually lost that battle. And it only took them a mere 350 years to formally admit that Galileo was correct. Wow. That happened in 1992.
Wow.
I think it's difficult, though. I mean, considering all of that, what happened to Galileo and Copernicus, it's still difficult to overstate the uproar caused by Darwin's 1859 book on the origin of species. Our Unity co-founder, Charles Fillmore, was a contemporary. He lived through this. Charles wrote a book called Christian Healing, and he observed this growing divide between science and religion. And here was his observation. He said, as a rule, religious people are not scientific. They think that religion and science are separated by a gulf, and that the scientific mind is spiritually dangerous. Science to them is associated with Darwin, Huxley, and other students of natural law who have been skeptical about the accuracy of the Bible from the standpoint of natural science, and whom, because of this skepticism, they brand as infidels. Hence, it has become almost heresy for a good Christian to think about his religion as having a scientific side. He saw it happening, and I think he sums it up brilliantly. When Darwin came along with his book, it was almost as if the supporters of biblical literalism finally decided that this was where they were going to draw the line in the sand. This was the last straw. This is where they would make their stand, and perhaps, for the very first time in human history, a natural and scientific explanation for something would be ousted and replaced by a supernatural explanation. That's what they hoped. So how does that seem to be working for them? Well, by way of example, something interesting happened last year. In July, they unveiled a statue of Clarence Darrow on the lawn outside of the county courthouse in Dayton, Tennessee, where they held the world-famous Scopes monkey trial in 1925. I think we have the statue unveiling here. Let's see. Yep, there it is. Commemorative statue, July 14th, 2017. That's the courthouse where they tried a high school teacher named John Scopes. He broke the law by teaching evolution to his students. It was a crime. So this was a criminal trial. And the Scopes trial attracted not just national attention, but international attention. And as you might imagine, not all of the attention was positive. In Paris, there was a daily newspaper that was reporting on the trial. And I wish I could read this with a French accent, but I'd probably end up sounding like a character on Monty Python. But just imagine a French accent here, okay? So this is from a Paris daily. And they're saying, on this side of the ocean, it is difficult to understand the susceptibility of American citizens on the subject of evolution, and precisely why they should so stubbornly cling to the biblical version. It is said in Genesis, the first man came from mud, and mud is not anything very clean. In any case, if the Darwinian hypothesis should irritate anyone, it should only be the monkey. That's pretty snarky. So during this trial, here's the Clarence Darrow connection. During the trial, the teacher was defended by Clarence Darrow, a very well-known lawyer, and the case was prosecuted by a guy named William Jennings Bryan. Now, Bryan already had a statue on the lawn. His statue had been out there since 2005. So there's a really interesting message there. Let's see if we got Bryan's statue. There it is. Yeah, truth and eloquence is what they say about him. No statue of Darrow, totally one-sided. It's like they're sending an interesting message here. So some folks looked at this and said, you know what? There should be both sides to this. Well, conservative Christians heard about the proposed Clarence Darrow statue, and they threatened protests and legal action, as you might imagine. One of the organizers was this woman on the next slide here. That is Pastor June Griffith, who threatened stiff opposition to the statue. Now, this is a picture of her holding a shotgun from one of her Facebook pages that she runs. So she organized a creationist counter-rally that was going to be held several days before the unveiling of the Darrow statue. And, well, the event drew a massive crowd, estimated by experts to have been around 20. And then a few days later, on the day of the actual unveiling, the best they could come up with was this next one here. They came up with a banner that said, "Read your Bible," which they put up behind the statue of Clarence Darrow. That'll show them. That kind of lack of enthusiasm is really the good news in all of this, because according to a Gallup poll conducted in May of 2017, Americans who hold this creationist belief that God created human beings in our present form around 10,000 years ago had dropped to 38% of the population. That's a pretty good drop. So that means today there's a 57% majority who believe in evolution, although I have to say that half of that number, even though they believe in evolution, they think that evolution itself was created and guided by a supreme being. Progress nonetheless. Progress, and 38% is still a considerable number of people. 38% of the population of the United States. And we see that in the stuff that's been going on in different states where they've been working very hard to pass laws that require public schools to teach creationism, biblical creationism, alongside evolution in science classrooms. They're still working hard to get those laws passed. Now, I think what's going to happen is that percentage is going to need to drop from 38% to something closer to 0 before that stops happening, but it's still going on. And it's a problem we need to be aware of, not for the sake of garnering outrage. This isn't about being outraged. It's about being vigilant. It's about being informed, because what they're trying to do is not harmless. Back in 2006, in response to these attempts to force creationism into science curriculum, the American Association for the Advancement of Science found it necessary to issue a press release. And this is what they had to say. Evolution is one of the most robust and widely accepted principles of modern science. It is the foundation of research in a wide array of scientific fields and, accordingly, a core element in science education. The AAAS Board of Directors is deeply concerned, therefore, about legislation and policies recently introduced in a number of states and localities that would undermine the teaching of evolution and deprive students of the education they need to be informed and productive citizens in an increasingly technological global community. Why is that important? Why is it so important for our students to learn how to be engaged in our technological global community? Well, for one thing, Cape Town, South Africa is about to run out of water. Have you heard about that?
Yeah.
They've got maybe 60 days left until the drinking water supply runs out, unless they get significant rain. Try to imagine that. This is a city with 3.74 million people and no running water. Now, who do you think the people are that are going to come up with a practical, long-term solution to that problem? It's probably not going to be the theologians, right? It's going to be the people who are sitting in our science classrooms and need to be learning the skills that it takes to address those issues that are happening to real people. This is a humanitarian issue. Now, don't get me wrong. We still need people like the Dalai Lama and Parker Palmer and others as spiritual leaders to keep us focused on expanding our circles of caring and compassion. We can't forget about empathy and altruism, because if we really don't care about others, if we don't care about what is happening to people in places like Cape Town, so far away, well, technology is useless if we don't have the will to bring it to bear. So empathy, compassion, altruism, technology, research, we need it all. We need people who have skills in science and technology and engineering and math, and we need people with skills on the spiritual or intangible side of things to keep us focused on our essential oneness, to help us to make decisions that are based on human values. Cape Town, as I said, may be on the other side of the world, but we are all ultimately in the same boat. And if we forget that, we're in trouble. You know, the whole idea behind the great Enlightenment period of human history was to bring together the best of both worlds. The Enlightenment was a revolution in both the sciences and the humanities. The great achievement of the Enlightenment was to remove religious barriers from every form of human expression. Art, literature, science, and technology, and ultimately spirituality itself. There were barriers to additional spiritual exploration that were removed. And out of that Enlightenment came ideas like evolution, as well as the kind of spiritual awakening that eventually put an end to slavery. We need both. And it's a delicate balance that requires patience and attention to maintain. When science and technology are divorced from human values, we get a corporate state that regards human beings as nothing more than statistics. We're turned into consumers. We're turned into units of labor. Profit, above all else. Nuclear physics can give us weapons of mass destruction or energy and an effective treatment for cancer. Human values have to guide the technology. And when we ignore the facts and the evidence carefully gleaned by observation, by the scientific method, people can run out of water, starve to death, and preventable diseases that we once thought were eradicated can come roaring back to life. Carl Sagan gave us this warning back in, I think it was 1995 when he wrote this. He gave us this warning about what can happen when things get out of balance in the other direction, when science and technology are ignored in favor of magical thinking and superstition. Here's what he said. He said, "We've arranged a global civilization in which most crucial elements profoundly depend on science and technology. We have also arranged things so that almost no one understands science and technology. This is a prescription for disaster. We might get away with it for a while, but sooner or later this combustible mixture of ignorance and power is going to blow up in our faces." That is succinct. Again, it's about balance, it's about perspective, and Charles Darwin had a very good grasp of that balance, but creationists still like to attack him. Personal attacks, calling him a godless heathen and worse. They can't refute him based on the facts, so they make personal attacks, accuse him of being the cause of Hitler and things like that. It's hypocritical and disgraceful, really. Because Darwin was both a scientist and a humanist. He had a spiritual side. This was a man who hated slavery. He hated cruelty to animals. Here's the last paragraph of his book on the origin of species. He's talking about having a worldview based on natural selection and evolution. And he says, "There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers having been originally breathed into a few forms or into one, and that whilst this planet has gone cycling on according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms most beautiful and most wonderful have been and are being evolved." Some of that mid-1800s English there, but there you have it. For Darwin, the natural world was beautiful, it was wonderful, it was filled with grandeur. In fact, I have yet to meet any practitioner of scientific naturalism who doesn't value those things, or who claims that they don't have any place in the scientific worldview. If anything, understanding the world can actually enhance the beauty of it, the beauty and the wonder of it all. Being able to explain what causes a rainbow takes nothing away from it. It's still a wonder, it's still beautiful, we can still look, and I hope smile a little more. We can still write and enjoy poetry and music, and we can still do things like what happened last Tuesday. I hope you all got a chance to watch that launch of what they call the Falcon Heavy by SpaceX. They put a Tesla into orbit. They put an electric car into orbit for a while, and now it's heading out to Mars. I think we got another shot of it here. Here's the side view of the Starman, as they're calling him, behind the wheel of the car. I mean, when the thing opened up and this started heading out, they played this David Bowie song, "Is There Life on Mars?" and Starman was in there. It was amazing. Live cameras on board and everything. So the person behind this was Elon Musk. He's behind Tesla. He's behind SpaceX. Brilliant guy. That was his own personal car they decided to put up there. I mean, why not? They had to put something heavy on the top of that thing anyway in order to test it, so why not? Why not? And the visuals are just awesome. So Tesla, as you might imagine, or I should say Elon Musk, as you might imagine, he's been congratulated by lots and lots of people after the launch, and so he wrote a reply to one of them. Here's what he said: "We're doing okay for a bunch of monkeys. Humanity rocks." So I watch all of that happening. To talk about the monkeys especially, that's pretty darn good. And I think to myself, yep, evolution works. It's not going to solve our problems overnight. It may not be easy, it may not always be pleasant, but as Elon Musk says, we're going to be okay. See you next week.